Hi there everyone! Fire Emblem Fates is a polarizing game both in its design and its writing, though at the same time it's very frequently praised for having some of, if not the absolute best gameplay in the series. It's a game I hold very close to my heart for various reasons, which has led to me having completed all paths at least a handful of times. But as with all Fire Emblem games, in spite of some entries' great replayability, Fates 2 eventually left me craving for a fresh challenge to sink the idle hours of my day into. So a few years ago, as I sat staring at the branch of Fate for the nth time, I found myself wondering, what if I attempted to complete the game using only my favourite character, Hinata? It sure enough sounded like a fun challenge, and it proved to be a worthwhile experience. Right up until the very end, where I was forced to bow out due to circumstances that I cannot explain to this very day. For years, I considered the Hinata solo run impossible, and this challenge was reduced to a bullet point on a bucket list pinned to the very back of my mind. That was until recently, when the idea started to stir once more. Since my previous attempt, I had gained a lot of experience and seen plenty of reports of people soloing Birthright with other characters. So one day, I sat down once more, researching and documenting my options, analysing my previous run, and consulting with other players about my updated plans, all in the pursuit of answering the question that had weighed so heavily on my mind for years. Can you beat Fire Emblem Fates using only Hinata? This project spans over 22 hours of gameplay footage, and as such, putting the whole thing together into a 1.5 hour compilation was a massive undertaking. So if you find yourself enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot and it lets me know that I should do more content like this in the future. Additionally, this entire run was streamed in my Discord server, Fateslandia. If you'd like to be a part of future projects such as these, or if you'd simply like to meet other Fire Emblem fans like yourself, then do check out the link in the video description. That all being said, I believe we've set the scene quite clearly. Time to see just how far the wild samurai can carry us. Now, every run of Fates is only as good as its core and design, and seeing as this solo run would be a spiritual successor to a similar run I did on the Fire Emblem Amino some years ago, I felt it would be neat to recreate the core I used for that specific run. Thus, Fuyumi was reborn. Except, upon looking back on some crusty pictures I'd taken at the time of the first run, I found out that the two Corins hardly resembled one another outside of their shared name. As it turns out, this design was instead a one-to-one copy of the Corin I used during my first ever playthrough of Conquest. I must have really liked this design if I remembered it so perfectly, given that run took place about 5 years ago by this point. Regardless, with the design settled upon, we set Fuyumi's birthday to the 20th of June, the day after we started the run, so that we get some weapon proficiency and, more importantly, an item drop early on in the run, which I'll talk more about later. We then set Fuyumi's traits to quick and fragile respectively, a plus speed minus defense build, for those who don't know Fates. Finally, we gave Fuyumi the fighter talent, the significance of which will become clear later down the line. So while we're still on the topic of this run's Corin, I'd like to take a moment to lay out the various rules we were working with during this solo run, and more specifically, the things Fuyumi here could and couldn't do. Obviously, we were playing this run on Lunatic Classic difficulty, with castle visiting and skill buying being impossible for equally obvious reasons. I disallowed the use of path bonus and DLC/amiibo items, but I did allow the use of my castle drops and pair-ups other than Corin, though the latter exclusively for support grinding. As for Fuyumi specifically, she couldn't trigger Dual Strike, Enter Combat, or Staff Bait. Basically, her sole function was to act as a backpack for Hinata, given this was a Hinata solo run after all. However, I did allow myself to use her to activate Dragon Veins, and more critically, to reclass. Anyhow, let the Hinata solo run commence, and we are officially on our way. Now, as you might have guessed from the title of this segment, Day 1 will be dedicated entirely to actually recruiting Hinata in the first place. Hinata shows up together with Oboro around the very first turns of Chapter 9, so we had a good bit of ground to cover before the run could even properly start. However, since the first 5 chapters before the Branch of Fate are pretty fast and aren't technically part of either path's story, I'll be going over their events in fairly quick succession. Once we pass the Branch of Fate, I'll be going into more detail. Chapters 1 and 2 I could pretty much handle on autopilot, given I knew the strategy for both of them like the back of my hand. It also definitely helped that the people there with me at the time were in just the right mind space. Oh good, we get to kill the worst character in the game. Let's go for it.
What the fuck?
Honestly, why would you choose Kaze if you have Saizo?
Literally, thank you, Momo.
Why would you vote if you have Hinata though?
Oh, so true.
True.
I just keep hearing better and better points. It's insane. Chapter 3 was always going to be a bit of a coin flip. Depending on how much damage Hans would be able to inflict, we could potentially have to deal with more units, and getting past the Pegasus reinforcements spawning from the southern forts could be treacherous if not planned around correctly. You wouldn't have guessed it, but I didn't plan around it correctly. We initially lost Jacob, which didn't exactly matter, as he'd be unavailable after this chapter until his return in Chapter 6 anyway. But the others weren't exactly happy with it.
Oh no, oh baby no.
No,
Jacob, come on my guy.
Jacob!
No!
You go!
We ended up sacrificing Kaze to defeat the Faceless boss in Chapter 4, but this presented some issues in Chapter 5, as without Kaze, we were much too short-handed to handle the Dark Mage reinforcements on top of the already present enemies. The mercenaries also one-shot Fuyumi with their Worm Slayers, which admittedly made this chapter a real pain in the neck. Yet, after some backtracking, strategic sacrifices, and making use of skills I rarely had before, we eventually made it past the Dark Mages and took down the boss, which now led us to Chapter 6, the Branch of Fate.
This way.
Big brother! He's my brother!
We're your family.
Having chosen to defend Hoshido, we had now officially entered the Birthright route, starting with Chapter 6, In the White Light. This chapter is both very straightforward and quick to clear, as in practice, you only really need to take out Xander, which is exactly what we did after Takumi failed to hit a 77% against Camilla. An excellent start to the run, and definitely not an omen for things to come. Following this chapter, we were thrown right into the My Castle tutorial. Having reorganized everything and having built the Dawn Armory, we realized that we unironically got quite the good RNG with the resource randomizer. Our castle came with a Pearl Spring and a fishing hole, both of which would become more prominent as the run progressed. More about that later on though. For now, we continue our quest to reach Hinata with Chapter 7, A Vow Upheld. This chapter takes place at Fort Jinya and features Korn's childhood friend, Silas, as the boss. In spite of the relatively high enemy count, working our way down to the entrance of the fort actually turned out to be pretty manageable. The one-space gaps between the many partitions on the map proved to be fantastic choke points, and these gaps made it so that Fuyumi, together with Rinka as a backpack, was more than able to dispatch the majority of the Norian forces. Some creative baiting allowed Fuyumi to swiftly take care of Silas and still be on time to catch this outlaw on his way out, which was essential. This guy swiped an Armor Slayer from the center chest earlier on, a weapon that would be instrumental for the early game stages of this solo run. After the chapter, Silas, Orochi and Saizo joined our ranks, which didn't really matter, but it definitely did raise my spirits. Back in our castle, we received a Pine Branch from Orochi and Ryoma's club from Kaze, two weapons that we'd most likely never touched throughout this run. Right here is a good moment to explain though that at times, characters in the castle will give you a random item, mineral or resource if you talk to them. This gimmick had the potential to make our run a little more manageable, though realistically, none of the random drops were ever going to be absolutely necessary to finish the game. Back to the castle, however, after building the Rod Shop for access to seals, tonics and healing items, we ventured on to Chapter 8, Fierce Winds. This chapter went by pretty painlessly, with the only real highlight being Hinoka and her retainers joining us. We eventually trumped Fuga with the Fuyumi-Rinka combo, grabbing his secret book and spiriting Hayato away from his tribe, then returned to the castle and built the lottery shop. It was time to gamble, something us Fire Emblem fans were naturally thrilled over.
Oh my god, gambling.
Time to gamble.
Gambling,
Gambling.
gambling.
Right off the bat, Tsubaki pulled through with his, dare I say, perfect luck, granting us an iron club to sell off later. Don't worry, you won't have to watch many of these rules, promise. Now, prior to Chapter 8, we decided to hold off on playing Paralog 1, as we figured it may come in handy when support grinding later on. We decided to skip the first invasion map for the same reason, which meant it was finally time. Chapter 9 was here, and with it, Hinata was within reach. At least, so we thought, as we headed into the Land of Gods. Ironically, Chapter 9 would turn out to be the biggest roadblock of the day, beating out even Chapter 5 in terms of tediousness. The hardest part of this map was undoubtedly getting past the first few turns, mainly because it proved tough to set up a consistent way to get out of the room our units were boxed into. In addition, we pretty much needed all our units to stay alive just to fight our way towards Hinata and Oboro, who would spawn at the end of turn 2 on the bottom of the map. Their spawn point was blocked off by a line of cavaliers, and to make matters worse, Hinata and Oboro don't move on lunatic difficulty. This meant it was a race against the clock before the Cavaliers would inevitably target Takumi's retainers, something we wanted to prevent at all costs. Our first strategy was to try to rush in and gauge what the damage would be. While we were able to eliminate most of the units near the entrance of our starting room, the Cavaliers turned out to be surprisingly strong, taking out Jacob and Hana before long. Our second strategy involved our long-range units defending the sides of the room while Korin and Rinka choked the entrance. This ended up working, but only to an extent. The cramped space we had to work with eventually led to me misplacing Azura, leading to another reset. The third time around, we just repeated our first strategy and hoped for different results, for whatever reason. Needless to say, that plan fell through pretty quickly. After some trial and error, however, we found a strategy that worked fairly consistently. If we guarded the sides of the room from 3 different angles, now including Silas on top of Saizo and Orochi, we could take out enough enemies to see Hinata and Oboro spawn in. After a little under 3 hours, our man was, at the very least, on screen.
Yes!
Oh,
Yes! Yes!
There he is.
There he
There's
is!
the boy.
There he is!
Nonetheless, a few more failed attempts followed, and under the motto of so close yet so far, our once seemingly successful attempt was abruptly brought to a stop by a sudden stroke of disaster.
I will try to What?
Are you? I told you. I told you.
So, what even happened here? Hinata had plenty of HP left to take a javelin hit, and somehow he still died. Even being able to rewatch the footage frame by frame, I struggled to find an explanation, but I ultimately came to the following conclusion. Hinata was hit by the low HP Cavalier, triggered triple threat, and killed him, thus freeing up a spot for him to be taken out by a second Javelin Cavalier. I really don't believe there could be a better example of the FatesFanboy RNG. Post-analysis aside, however, victory soon came to us in the form of guard Naginata Hinoka, something we had somehow managed to not consider up until this point. Her insane defensive stats finally allowed us to reliably carve a way towards Hinata and Oboro, and after roughly an hour and 15 minutes on this map alone, the Hinata solo run was finally a reality.
Now the real fun begins.
Finally!
Now that the run was officially underway, I felt there was one important disclaimer I needed to put out there. Starting from this point, I aspire to keep the run as clean as possible, which meant getting no intentional kills with any unit that wasn't Hinata. However, if an enemy instead self-destructed into a character that wasn't Hinata, I felt I was free of any blame. And the reason why I mention this now is because it happened multiple times on this map. Given our unit density and the fact Hinata couldn't be on 2 sides at once, it was unfortunately next to unavoidable. Now, here's where the armor slayer we retrieved from that outlaw in Chapter 7 comes in. It was the only weapon to not inflict a speed penalty on Hinata, but to still allow him to one-round most enemies at base, including all of the reinforcements. We charged past the static armor knights, received 2 pretty solid level ups for our boy, and then pushed straight onto Zola, whose defeat would come down to a coin flip. One which I was willing to take, but as you'll hear in this fragment, not everyone was on board with that plan.
But like, what's the chance that he hits a 36 and then he hits an 18?
Fate, be kind to your name and don't tempt fate.
But what are the chances, right?
No, do not.
In the end though, the chances turned out to be in our favor, and one more enemy phase was enough to defeat Zola and get a brilliant level up for Hinata.
That's not a great start, but we'll fix it. I can fix him, yeah. I swear.
With the last few stragglers out of the way, Chapter 9 had finally been cleared, and our goal for the day had been reached. What's more, the clock had passed midnight over in my part of the world, which meant it was Fuyumi's birthday, for which we got a second pine branch. While gathering our bearings on day 2, we paused for a moment to admire how fantastic Fates could have looked had it released on a different console. Seriously, these graphics are shockingly good, and the HD rendering has made us appreciate some of Fate's sprite and artwork even more than we already did. In that spirit, I'd like to give a massive shout out to the creators of the mods I used for this run, whose usernames I'll put on the screen right now. You guys are heroes, with a capital H. Once we were done appreciating the smoothness of Hinata's portrait, however, we were left to complete some tasks around the castle. Most importantly, we checked out our available supports, and unsurprisingly, Fuyumi and Hinata had reached C rank over the course of Chapter 9. This meant that from this point onward, pairing up with Fuyumi would grant Hinata the effects of supportive, Fuyumi's personal skill, +10 to hit rate, +2 to damage dealt, and -2 to damage taken, on top of any other in-combat boosts granted by Fuyumi. This would be highly useful for Chapter 10, which would have us facing a ton of diviners and ninjas, 2 as of yet tough matchups for Hinata. Knowing this, we bought 2 Kodachis at the Dawn Armory and had Hinata forge them into a +1 Kodachi for himself at the smithy we just built. This +1 forge would grant 2 extra points of might, and thus of attack, an essential buff in the face of the next chapter. Here's also where you realize why the Pearl Spring we'd been given had been such great RNG. Because pearls are the mineral used to forge swords, Hinata's primary weapon type at the moment. Having stocked up all strength and speed tonics, we soon headed into Chapter 10, Ninja Village. With the right setup, this chapter was fairly easily manageable. All we needed were a strength tonic to 2-round the ninjas and even one-shot the diviners upon retaliation, a Kodachi to be able to counter literally every enemy on the map, and a ton of healing items. Our general strategy was to take cover in the forest tile, then equip our unbreakable Kodachi and chip away at the plethora of enemies coming our way, including Takumi. Takumi spawns at the end of turn 1 as an enemy and only converts to your side if you sync to him with Azura. We weren't allowed to bring Azura, however, so for the first time in the history of me playing this game, I took out Takumi on this map. With his own retainer, nonetheless.
Well, let's actually see what happens, because I've never done this.
I think he died.
Defeated by you?
As you may have foreseen though, this was once again inconsequential. Regardless of whether or not Takumi survives this map, he joins your army at the end of the chapter. By the way, can I just say that it's dumb these two have no special dialogue if they engage in combat here? Hinata only ran into us in the first place because he was searching for Takumi, but he says nothing when finally finding him? Thanks, Maeda. In any case, one thing that made this map considerably easier was Hinata's inherent vantage skill, which allowed him to take out many of the enemies before they could even touch him, or deplete his guard stands. While shredding through the Mokushujins blocking his way towards Kotaro, Hinata got the strength level up he needed to one-shot the diviners in this chapter. This meant that the rest of the chapter was practically a cakewalk, including our duel with Kotaro. After one more solid level up, we ultimately managed to bait him into using his Kodachi, then one-rounded him with a steel katana while he was still being affected by its -5 effective speed penalty. With that skirmish behind us, both Hinata and his future wife were officially out of the woods, literally as well as proverbially. And no, I didn't mean Fuyumi when I said Hinata's wife. As per my plan for this specific run, Hinata would need to achieve an S rank with Kagero rather than with Korin, and the reason for that would come into play before long. Incidentally, it turned out that the Takumi dialogue post-chapter is exactly the same if you defeat him during the chapter, which was mildly disappointing to say the least. Even if Hinata and Oboro do actually have special lines at the end of the chapter if they're in your army by this point, this map had a host of missed opportunities. Back in our castle, we built a Hinata and Fuyumi statue as well as the arena, the latter of which we immediately took advantage of by wagering some pearls for future smithing. We didn't altogether spend much time loafing around, however, as we had some support ranks to grind now that we had access to Kagero. First up on the agenda was Paralog 1, Tragic Start. On this map we found, much to our relief, that Kagero's eyesight has remained impeccable in spite of her prolonged incarceration.
No shit, Kagero. We're under attack, you don't say.
We doubled our way through this map with a Kagero-supported Hinata, rushed the Mozu to grab our free vulnerary, and slowly chipped away at the motionless boss with our forged Kodachi. All in all, we got a defense level on Hinata and managed to reach C support between him and Kagero, which is about all the noteworthy points for this map. Given how many faceless are still going to appear during this compilation, I wager it's probably for the best to keep their screen time to a minimum for now. It was back to the castle once more, and we now had some things to unpack. We built the mess hall, which would tie in beautifully with our fishing hall. Fish-based dishes served in the mess hall would grant our units an increase in speed, obviously an essential stat to have a lot of on lunatic difficulty. Shortly after, we fed Hinata a Seraph robe, a secret book, and a goddess icon for +5 HP, +2 skill, and +4 luck respectively. I feel like I can justifiably skip how the first invasion map went, but what I will say about it is that, in conjunction with one more scout map, it allowed Hinata and Kagero, as well as Hinata and Fuyumi, to reach support rank B. Lastly, we upgraded the Hinata statue to level 2 before heading into Chapter 11, To the Sea. Chapter 11, in my opinion, represents a critical point in the game, as this chapter is the first one to introduce promoted enemies. Upon looking back at my methods during my previous Hinata solo run, I found that I completed this chapter with only Savage Hinata before. However, I failed to recall that this time around and foolishly stuck with Samurai, a decision which would end up busting my kneecaps quite spectacularly. I actually couldn't double nor one-shot most 1-2 range enemies with the Kodachi, and upon being chipped down, said enemies would shift into recovery mode and retreat towards the lone Falcon Knight on the very left edge of the map. This Falcon Knight never healed anyone though, which created a massive ball of injured yet together powerful enemies.
So now we have a minor issue on our hands. It's just a minor
no.
issue. It's nothing too bad.
In the same turn that ball came flying my way, Hinata went down to a 50-50, which meant it was back to the start of the chapter for us. Despite us activating the Dragon Veins cutting flyer movement in half in our second attempt, Hinata still wasn't able to take out the enemy forces efficiently enough to not get overwhelmed in the later stages of the map. Also mind that during all of this, I simultaneously had to talk to and babysit Reyna, an allied Kinshi Knight who spawns at the end of the first turn and beelines for Corrin immediately after. If I ignored her, she'd continue to chase me around the map and either take up a space or tragically die in the process. Not that the latter would in any way impact the run, but I felt that keeping her alive here might somehow benefit us. Regardless, our second failure meant we were headed back to the drawing board. What now? Samurai clearly wasn't going to cut it on this map. What we needed was a class that was fast, difficult to kill, and that could attack and counter from 1 as well as 2 range. Which meant it was high time to bust out the main strategy for this solo run. Just before this chapter, we managed to get Hinata's support rank with Kagero up to B rank. Now, we simply had to finish what we'd started. 2 scout maps later, Hinata and Kagero had reached support rank A, and after another 2 maps, their S support was a reality. Hinata now had a wife who was, without a doubt, way out of his league, and who would soon be completely irrelevant again. You see, Hinata's love story in this run is one of pure necessity. We, and by extension he, were only in it for the marital benefits. The ninja class Kagero gives access to. We figured that ninja was going to be the class that gave us the best odds at completing this run, and we had ample opportunity to test that theory in Paralog 11, a long grudge. Aside from paying a visit to Hisame, we had planned to grind Hinata's shuriken proficiency up to at least a C rank, for access to weapons that would, actually deal damage. As for how the first of those plans went, yeah, there was no way in hell we could ever get to Hisame on time before he'd get dogpiled by a horde of faceless. Trust me, we tried. Twice. Devastated by this loss.
Well, he's dead.
Well, that's a reset.
Yeah, that's not great. I mean, we don't need his army, but how does he die already? What the hell?
Or I suppose he just kind of sucks.
I mean, you're not wrong. It's actually easier once his army is dead, not going to lie.
We reluctantly accepted Hinata's solid progress, including his strength level, getting lock touch, and improving his shuriken proficiency all the way up to C rank, exactly as we'd aimed to. With renewed confidence, an ace support between Hinata and Fuyumi, and a surge in skill and speed prior to entering the map anew, we gave Chapter 11 another stab. As it turned out, our access to shurikens would give us a keen advantage on this map in particular. Most 1-2 range weapons the enemies carried inflicted a -3 effective speed penalty, and prevented said enemies from doubling, while our shurikens actually granted a visible +2 speed bonus and could double. We had effectively gained 7 speed and the ability to double just from switching weapons, though to be fair, the Kodachi was simply our best 1-2 range option when sticking to the Samurai class. In short, an early reclass proved to be the way to go. Hinata managed to double every enemy on the map except the Falcon Knight, leading to a clean sweep and a free arm scroll for us to hoard. Moreover, between the scout maps and the promoted enemies in Chapter 11, Hinata's level had increased from 17 all the way up to 20, rewarding him with 1 point of strength, 3 points of skill, 1 point of luck, 2 points of defense, and 1 point of resistance. Oh, and look who survived! Told you keeping her alive would benefit us. With 6 Dragon Vein points under our belt, we made some much needed improvements to our castle before realizing we could probably still squeeze one more chapter into the time we had for today. Before following up on that feeling though, we first needed to realize one very important promotion: Master Ninja Hinata. With a whopping +5 increase to resistance and rekindled access to swords, this class change both bolstered Hinata's chances against magic units and made his weapon options a little more diverse. 2 very useful improvements going forward.
Well, there he is, Master Ninja Hinata. I never thought I'd see the day, honestly.
But damn, that sprite looks so good on him.
Now, going into Chapter 12, Dark Reunion, we were greeted by both Azura's and Garen's song, though I definitely prefer the one over the other. This chapter reinforced our belief that Master Ninja Hinata had been the right choice, as besides the Great Knights scattered across the map, there wasn't much of anything that could threaten him. Turns out a Master Ninja with an existing defense stat is kind of an insane combination. More confident than at any earlier point in this run, we made our way across the Opera House's gondola pathway, hoping to catch the Locktouch Outlaw beelining for the only chest on this map. We had to rush a little bit given all the enemies that stood in the way of our one-man army, but in the end, we managed to intercept at just the right time. With the chest secured, all we still needed to do was find a comfortable choke point and watch the Norian troops self-destruct into Hinata. A flawless plan in theory, though in practice, there was one problem. Xander. Sporting a staggering 32 defense, the Crown Prince of Nor looked to be almost untouchable. Almost. The steel shuriken we had equipped would inflict a -4 defense penalty to enemies after combat, which was exactly enough to break past Xander's insane physical bulk. And combined with Poison Strike, which dealt 8 damage each time we initiated combat, an HP and luck level, and some lucky dodges and guard stances, Xander went down surprisingly easily, and his retainers followed shortly after him. We swiped the Draco's shield from the chest we'd guarded earlier, received another decent level up, and then, just for a laugh, checked our odds against Garen. One can dream. Having satisfied our curiosity, we took no chances in getting to the exit, and with the end of this chapter, we also finished off what had been a turbulent but exciting day 2. Day 3 began with a very clutch lottery roll from Azama, granting us another Kodachi we could use to further enhance the Ninja Bane. We also applied the Draco's shield we'd obtained in chapter 12 and bought some tonics, all in the spirit of preparing as thoroughly as we could, since we realized we'd lost a lot of time on chapter 11 the day before. This meant we'd have to pick up the slack today. Our aim for day 3 was to, at the very least, reach the midway point of the game. Optimistic about our odds and excited to forge ahead, we set off for chapter 13, Another Hope. Chapter 13 is admittedly a rather insignificant one. Or well, it would have been if it weren't for what is perhaps Fate's most infamous cutscene playing ahead of it. Which, for reasons probably known by everyone watching this video, I will now skip past. Anyway, chapter 13 is our first real encounter with Camilla and Hans as enemy units, and both of them can be fairly threatening if you don't have access to swords or tomes. They wouldn't be much of a problem until later on, however. For the beginning stages of this chapter, our main priority was visiting the various villages on this map, which all in all netted us 13,000 gold, a Wayne Festal, Spirit Dust, a Heart Seal, and another shuriken rank on top of all that, enabling us to now use all but one shuriken in the game. That done, all we needed to do now was provoke Camilla to attack with the Ragnarok tome so we had weapon triangle advantage, 2 round her and reap the rewards, namely a point in skill and speed. We still had to be wary of the final cluster of enemies, including Hans, a general, and a Wyvern Lord, all of which would now rush us, and a combination of which could easily take us out. Fortunately though, we couldn't have brought a more clear-cut plan.
The plan is simple, Hinata.
By a stroke of good luck, Hinata managed to dodge or block the most powerful attacks, and once the player phase rolled around again, Hinata landed the killing blow on Hans in the flashiest way possible.
Crit him! Yes!
Practically ending off chapter 13 then and there. Hinata was rewarded with a purely defensive level and lethality. Now the fun could start for real. Unfortunately, it appeared something caused the lethality animation to be slightly bugged, but if anything, the lack of an eye-piercing shade of red made me appreciate this skill even more. Baruka and Selena went down without much of a struggle, and just like that, chapter 13 was done and dusted in as little as 15 minutes. As we returned to the castle, it dawned on us that Ryoma and Scarlet had now joined our army. I sincerely wish I could have given Raijinzu to Hinata, but unfortunately, we'd have to make do with the Raider Katana Silas gave us. Clearing chapter 13 had enabled us to upgrade the Dawn Armory, which granted us access to a handful of essential weapons, most notably the dual and barb shuriken, as well as a silver katana. These we eagerly purchased before continuing our campaign with chapter 14, Light Scatters. This chapter takes place at Nor's border walls and is, all things considered, largely straightforward. Right off the bat though, the unfortunate realization struck that we'd have to take out Benny, who absolutely didn't deserve anything that was about to happen to him. Prospective guilt aside though, I find that there realistically isn't much to say about this chapter. We opted to sit at the edge of one of the patches of forest scattered all over the map, and in that position, most unpromoted enemies did no damage to Hinata. Here's something interesting I learned about this map though. The reinforcements that appear inside the fortress up top apparently also spawn in when enough enemies have been defeated outside the fort, which inevitably happened given our strategy of staying put and letting everyone come to us. This premature appearance of enemy reinforcements wasn't the problem, however. The Bolt X Berserker suddenly rushing towards us was a bit of a scare, but then I was reminded that he has literally zero magic. Peak enemy design. Benny and Charlotte both went down to distinct shuriken, and from that point onward, dealing with the enemies inside the fort was a piece of cake. Once out of range of any enemies, we triggered the fort's Dragon Vein with Fuyumi, inflicting 10 damage to all enemies within, and leaving an easy cleanup job for Hinata. The generals and berserkers were taken care of with the Sting and Dual shuriken respectively. Hinata got a resplendent level up, and with Daniela out of the way...
How sad to make it all the way here only to be butchered by me. We'll see how that goes for you. Easy.
It was curtains for chapter 14. Another swift castle intermission saw us upgrade the rod shop for access to a larger assortment of seals. We also purchased a second Sting Shuriken, and after a quick ore swap for some quartz, we forged the Fury Cutter. Our pace had been excellent so far, and we had no intention of dropping it anytime soon. Our campaign would soon have us take our first steps into Norian territory in Chapter 15, Wolfskin Peak. Mount Geru, while admittedly not giving off the most hospitable vibe ever, actually ended up providing us a pretty agreeable map. This chapter more or less followed the same storyline as the previous one in that we didn't need to do much. If we either holed up in one of the forts or forests, or perched on one of the mountain tiles, the Wolfskin couldn't touch us, and the Wolf Secners, while sometimes mildly annoying due to some of their skills like Poison Strike or Counter, only dealt negligible damage. Adding insult to injury on the Wolfskin's end, the forts would heal off any of the damage dealt by the Wolf Secners. Given this, Chapter 15 turned out to be little more than a treasure trove disguised as a route map. While getting through the map took relatively long due to the continued influx of reinforcements up until turn 10, it did ultimately reward us with 2 Master Seals, 6,000 gold, a Beast Rune, a Secret Book, a Speed Wing, Spirit Dust, and an S-rank in Shurikens for Hinata. And all we had to do for it was wipe an entire race off the face of Fateslandia. Now that's what I call a steal. For those of you who know the general storyline of Fates, you'll know that this chapter leads into a cutscene where Corrin almost gets dragged into a ravine due to a landslide, but Kaze saves her from falling at the very last moment. This cutscene is also the only time in Fates when a playable character can die by story means rather than by gameplay means. If Corrin by this point doesn't have an A support with Kaze, he will sacrifice himself for Corrin and permanently leave the player's army. Which is exactly what I wanted to happen. Now we were able to ridicule this dumpster fire of a cutscene in all of its glory.
Why would you talk about this when you're literally...
She's literally on the edge of dying.
Perhaps sacrificing myself will do, absolutely. Like, how does he do that? How does he just fling Corrin up into the air and then not have enough time? He literally had enough time to run away.
What is the most concerning is that at the beginning he struggles to even put her up the cliff, and he was able to just throw her.
He just uses one arm, just throws a full human body just 20 feet up into the air, but he doesn't have enough time to just run away. He deserves to die.
To compensate for the grievous loss of my least favorite male Fates character, however, the game decided to bless me with my least favorite female Fates character. No rest for the wicked, I suppose. Also, Setsuna found Sakura's rod.
Don't want to know what kind of rod that is.
Regardless, and now that we were getting deeper and deeper into the game, we felt the need to drastically improve Hinata's damage output. And towards that purpose, the talent we'd selected for Fuyumi at the very beginning of the run would finally rear its head again. After a Heart Seal and a Master Seal soon after, Fuyumi was now a Berserker. The pair-up bonuses the Berserker class grants are arguably the best in the whole game for an offensive physical class. Granting +5 to strength and +3 to speed, the class is only really rivaled by the Wolf Secner as far as pair-up bonuses are concerned. But for obvious reasons, that one was out of the picture. Our setup for the rest of the run was, aside from some skills we'd need later on, all but complete, and in a moment, we would have Chapter 16, Pleasure Palace, to test it out on. This chapter admittedly presented a few issues. First and foremost, we found that our attention was quickly spread thin by the various outlaws that would head for the chests at the beginning and end of the map. The former wouldn't actually open both chests at the start, something which would have made our job much easier, while the latter spawned so early on in the chapter that it was tough to catch up to him. And catching up to him was a must, as the chests at the end contained a very valuable arm scroll and 10,000 gold. We wagered that we could probably intercept him on his way back up to the exit point, which would be right by Yago on the rightmost edge of the map. Before we had a chance to test our gut feeling though, our run was brought to a much too early end by a 33% sorcerer hit. That's my RNG for you. Rest assured though, there's still much worse in store for you, such as this 26% Dark Mage hit in our next attempt, even if it did grant us a really good level up. In this second attempt, we came to the conclusion that we couldn't preemptively take out the upper outlaw, so we instead rushed over to the closest treasure room, boxing in the outlaw inside and salvaging the silent staff he'd swiped. We quickly grabbed the goddess icon in the other chest, then set off to pursue the far outlaw. Thinking about it, this chapter was more like a chase than a fight, as our preoccupation with catching up with that outlaw at the end of the chapter largely overshadowed our concern over any of the other enemies on this map. And while said preoccupation may have led to some close shaves here and there, in the end, we barely managed to catch the various outlaws on their way to the escape point, securing 16,000 gold and the critical arm scroll mentioned before. Now, one thing I can never seem to remember about this map is whether or not Yago moves. Oh. Fortunately for us, Yago forgot how the weapon triangle works in Fates and willingly threw himself into Fury Cutter range. Such a waste of the Ginung. Fun fact about this map, by the way, it's actually a route map, and since these guys were static and we never got into their range, we had to backtrack all the way back to the start before being able to bring chapter 16 to a close. We'd worked through a solid portion of our healing items over the span of the last few chapters, so a trip to the Rod Shop was by this point inevitable. While we were in the castle anyway, we also upgraded the smithy and fed Hinata the goddess icon, Speedwing, and secret book for +4 luck, +2 speed, and +2 skill respectively. Perhaps it might have been advisable to stop by the mess hall for a warm meal beforehand, but as it stood, we were soon headed into chapter 17, Lost in the Ice, without any cold resistance to speak of. Chapter 17 is also known as the Flora map of Birthright, and is, in my opinion, one of the more interestingly designed maps in the game. Essentially, the greater part of the enemy force on this map is completely optional, and only appears if you visit any of the hostile villages, with the only exception being the wave of reinforcements that invariably spawns on turn 6. Right from the get-go, we knew that we could make this chapter as easy or as hard as we wanted to, but we also knew that within the clusters of optional reinforcements would be enemies with useful items to either sell or use later on, among these being a Master Seal and a Spirit Katana. Thus, we settled on visiting every village on the map and reaping any rewards we could. Our most important stop was going to be the village at the very top, which was also the only friendly village on this entire map, and the one that would give us 10,000 gold upon visiting. On the way there, we gained an additional point in HP and skill before claiming our reward for not being Norian. With our strategy of weaving between defensive tiles in full effect, we really had no trouble carving our way through the self-inflicted reinforcements. That was, until we got to the bottom left village. One unfortunate misclick made it so that I had Hinata visit the final village on low HP without healing or switching weapons beforehand. And all of a sudden, as a small army of fighters and berserkers surrounded us...
Oh, maybe that's not great.
Things were looking mildly problematic. Fortunately, a combination of vantage crits and the strongest enemies attacking right when we had our guard stance up led to us making it out by the skin of our teeth and saving ourselves a second try at this map. One minor heart attack richer, we swiftly pushed onto Flora, and after a brief but essential skill check, we cut her down to size and subsequently wrapped up chapter 17. Whew! For that fire performance, I dare say we've earned ourselves a nice roast.
No.
Just the fucking no.
Now, we knocked out a good handful of chapters today, but there was still plenty of time in this session to make some more magic happen. For starters, we upgraded the private quarters for a greater chance at being able to invite Hinata, and as fate would have it, he immediately popped up. Since we had an ace support with him by this point, we could now start building up these friendship hearts. Not that it would really impact anything, but it at least gave me a chance to see some lines of his that I'd never seen before. You know, since I always marry him instead of befriending him. After some contemplation, we decided to start grinding up Hinata's support rank with Takumi for our convenience later on in the run. Getting an A+ support rank between the two would grant us one major benefit during day 4, though we'll cross that bridge when we get there. One scout map into our grinding break, Hinata found something good, and soon after, his C support with Takumi was unlocked. 2 more maps unlocked their B support, and after a total tally of 5 maps, Hinata and Takumi had reached support rank A+ without anything questionable happening whatsoever.
Hinata? What did you just say, Hinata?
Don't worry about it, don't worry about it.
With our accrued Dragon Vein points, we ended up upgrading the arena and the fishing hall, as well as building the 3 automatons for future invasion maps. However, with the preparatory grinding session out of the way, it was now time to face our 3rd Norian Royal in his eponymous chapter, Leo.
Norian law is blunt on the subject of traitors. There is only one punishment. The sentence is death.
For as insane of a cutscene as this chapter starts with, its actual map design is a massive letdown. We all had a feeling this map would be pretty quick given its layout and lack of enemy diversity, and we were proven absolutely right. Realistically, this entire map can be summarized in just one interaction. Yeah, unfortunately, this map spearheads a principle that is especially prominent in the latter half of Fates, and in Birthright in particular. Many enemies equals difficulty. I mean, look at this. This is not difficult, it's just inconvenient, and it's certainly not an interesting enough gimmick to make multiple maps revolve around, as the late game of Birthright regrettably likes to do. Anyway, since all these faceless only gave 1 EXP and I didn't feel like watching the literal exact same round of combat for half an hour, I decided to skip through the enemy phase.
Like look at that.
Oh, you actually killed Niles.
I killed Niles. Well, I missed that, unfortunately, but like if that saves me 20
what's
minutes.
Another faceless, you know. Oh, you might just end the map right now.
I will end the map right now. That's it.
We regrettably didn't get to square off against Odin Dark. But hey, what can you do when the boss literally self-destructs into you? We were more than content with the progress we'd made today, and to reflect that satisfaction, we upgraded our Pearl Spring to level 3 and gave Hinata an energy drop and 2 servings of magic dust, all in the whimsical spirit of we might as well. Day 3 had come to a close, meaning we, as well as Hinata, could take a well-deserved break. We would need it, as Day 4 was going to be the most tedious, mentally trying day yet. When I mentioned just now that Day 4 was going to be tedious, I wasn't lying. On the agenda for the day were, among others, Fort Dragonfall and the Demon Falls. And for those of you that know Fates, you'll know that nothing good can ever come out of either of those locations. With a mind to get them behind us sooner rather than later, we completed the menial tasks around the castle before paying a visit to Notre Sagesse, where we would have a little rendezvous with the namesake of this chapter 19, the Rainbow Sage. To be completely frank, I never understood the purpose of this chapter. The whole map feels like one massive troll, from the downright dysfunctional enemy stats to the fact that you pretty much have to backtrack at some point due to the 2 enemy pairs that block the stairs on either side. As for some reason, this map is not a defeat the boss map. Exactly because of the aforementioned enemy stats, however, this chapter ended up being a walk in the park, and as such, I can summarize this one pretty quickly. The stat divisions on this map pretty much eliminated all the most threatening parts of the enemy units, from the 0-speed Master Ninjas and max magic but physical weapon wielding Great Masters, to the 0-defense generals and adventurers with nothing but physics staves. The only units that could potentially cause issues on this map were the berserkers with maxed out strength towards the very top. But with a Barb Shuriken in hand and only 15 HP to deplete, we managed to work them out of the picture before you could even count to 15. Our Fury Cutter sliced through the boss like a hot knife through butter, granting Hinata a solid level, and after reaping a bold Naginata from yet another zero magic enemy, we were inevitably forced to retrace our steps to round up and defeat the final few enemies. That done though, the Rainbow Sage pulled off one final prank before bestowing upon us the noble Yato, a weapon that was undoubtedly going to serve our berserker Fuyumi very well. Once back in the castle, Hinata told us to go touch grass. We built a ballista to harken back to the good old days after Thracia 776, and before long, we were headed into our second invasion map. The thing with invasion maps, however, is that when you only bring 2 units and pair them up, the map basically becomes a waiting game. Especially when you seat them in this... chair?
Not just any chair. A throne. 30 avoid. 2 defense. Health restoration. Well, you have yourself a good day, sir. I'm sorry for bothering you.
Back to the castle it was. Or, still in the castle, just without invaders, I guess? We had enough Dragon Vein points to spare to build the launcher, and to upgrade the lottery shop to level 3, where Azama gave us a handful of beans to celebrate. Hinata refused to eat Motsu's sashimi, which meant he regrettably missed out on an additional point of speed. With that, however, it was high time that we got to work on the most painful series of chapters Birthright had to offer. First and foremost, it was off to chapter 20, Fort Dragonfall. Wow, look at all those faceless! It sure would be a shame if they respawned at the end of every enemy phase, trapping any oblivious players between the concerningly pulsating walls of the fort and several small armies of dollar store Frankensteins.
See, I'm just kinda stuck here. That's not ideal.
Okay, so our first attempts ended in a bit of an embarrassing stalemate. But not to worry, things are only getting worse from here. Allow me to quickly explain what our plan was going into this chapter. We wanted to get to the back of the fort as soon as possible, given there were chests there containing a seraph robe and a pair of boots. The presence of an indistinguishable faceless with +1 movement and lock touch made matters much more urgent, forcing us to find the quickest way to weave between the incessant hordes of faceless while also avoiding getting stuck. Again. Needless to say, with how some of the faceless would spawn on choke points and thus blocked off entire sections of the already cramped map before we could even get to said choke points, this map was a bit of a headache to deal with. Eventually though, we managed to slip past the top left acid bog, narrowly escaping getting boxed in the exact same way as before. Even without the use of tonics, none of these faceless were actually able to even scratch Hinata, but the fact that they respawned 4 or 5 at a time each turn gradually grew into a bigger problem with each passing turn. We succeeded in recovering the Spy Shuriken from the Lock-Touch faceless and progressed to the top right chest chamber, which, to my personal dismay, contained the Seraph robe. And when after the enemy phase, to my greater personal dismay, the bottom right chest had been looted, we realized there were 2 Lock-Touch faceless at large, and that the boots were practically forfeit. Even with the greatest RNG in the world, there was simply no way in which we could curb the enemy reinforcements to a point where we'd be able to intercept that second Lock-Touch faceless. While this was an unfortunate turn of events, it did allow us to find out that the boss of this map would actually start moving after a certain number of turns had passed. Knowing this, all we realistically needed to do was beeline for the boots chest, then brute force our way through the swarm of faceless one space at a time, before ultimately having the boss self-destruct into Hinata's Barb Shuriken. Which was exactly how things came to pass, giving Hinata an extra point in strength and skill, and thus allowing us to finally clear chapter 20. Albeit without the Spy Shuriken and Seraph robe this time around. A small price to pay for some quality leather. Back in our castle, we opted not to beat around the bush and immediately used the goddess icon and boots on Hinata, blessing him with a capped lock stat and 7 movement. If nothing else, this guy was never getting crit. Inside our treehouse, Hinata recited his wedding vows to us outside of Kagiro's knowledge, which must have made this 3-way encounter in the arena a minute later all the more awkward. Our recent success at Fort Dragonfall had now also permitted us to upgrade the Dawn Armory to its highest level, giving us access to another copy of the most essential weapons in this run so far. And yet, all of these positives paled in comparison to the misery that was up next. Chapter 21, Burning Falls. Or, as Ryoma so very eloquently states it, by gods, the waterfall is on fire! This map introduces the Stoneborn, an annoyingly powerful enemy with low movement but large attack range, being able to attack from as far as 5 spaces away. Aside from there being a plethora of these guys all over the map, one more factor that made this map hellish to play through was the method in which we had to move forward. On every layer of the map stood a statue with 2 dragon veins. One of these would open a path forward across the lava, while the other would flood the current layer we were on with lava instead, turning all tiles into damaging tiles that would additionally restrict our movement. Essentially, our success or failure on this map came down to 3 50-50s. And, as it's my luck we're speaking of, meh, that about checks out. Oh, by the way, did I mention that if you do trigger the wrong dragon vein, reinforcements, including Master Ninjas and Stoneborn with massive rocks, will spawn for 4 consecutive turns before the path forward opens up on its own?
Your solution is to reclass into a Kinshi, that's it.
Not per se, I just need to win the 50-50s.
You're not going to win the 50-50s.
Okay, alas.
That was perfectly timed though, that was perfectly timed.
In spite of the Stoneborn's terrible hit rate, we were overwhelmed pretty quickly and thus forced to reset. I got a bit luckier on the second try.
This time, I'm correct. See, I told you, it's literally that easy.
Faked, rigged.
But my success was short-lived, as the second floor saw me lose the 50-50 once again. By some stroke of luck, I made it off the second floor with only 16 Stoneborn in pursuit, a feat which filled me with what can only be described as a desperate man's drug. Gopium.
This is fine.
This is not fine.
Is it though, Fate?
When I'd eventually taken too long to gamble on another 50-50, the game made the decision for me, opening the way forward but also preemptively flooding the third floor with lava and spawning more reinforcements. In our current position, I was forced to admit the gravity of the situation.
I think I put myself in a bit of a predicament here.
Before eventually being done in by a 28% of all things. One more reset later, we collectively decided that it would be immensely beneficial for us to reclass into a flying class and breeze through the map that way. Unfortunately, we had planned things out such that just that was possible. Hinata doesn't have access to any flying class options of his own, but the attentive viewer will remember that at the end of day 3, we achieved an A+ support between Hinata and Takumi. Originally, we'd planned things out this way to have access to air superiority for later use, but if this course of action could also help us clear what is possibly the most obnoxious map in Birthright, we were more than happy to take advantage of it in that way too. As such, our course was set. Following a quick reclass and the application of 2 arm scrolls, Hinata could inherit Hinoka's Guard Naginata and tackle chapter 21 anew. This time, from the skies. With this new strategy, we were able to simply snake our way through the enemy lines, passing by the lava streams and mountains without any need to gamble on the 50-50 dragon veins anymore. The only obstacle that still remained beyond this point was the Stoneborn boss, to which Kinshi Knight Hinata couldn't quite deal enough damage to finish off the map before being swarmed by the collection of Stoneborn and Spearmasters on the top floor. In order to actually complete the map, another on-the-spot reclass would thus be necessary, but through a bit of a mix-up on my end, we didn't actually have any partner seals on hand anymore, which meant we had to resort to the next best reclass, Blacksmith. In reality, even though I very much enjoyed this class on Hinata, it was only the next best reclass as it maintained Hinata's access to swords and gave him a little bit of extra longevity against the physical units encircling him. And speaking of circles...
Oh my god, that was one of my...
Let's fucking go!
Even if the Blacksmith class wasn't here to stay, it at least went out with a bang. Vowing not to repeat my seal mistake, I cleared out the assortment available at the rod shop before upgrading it to level 3, consequently allowing us to now purchase Eternal Seals as well as a Speed Wing for Hinata, the latter of which we immediately applied. Of course, we also reclassed Hinata back into a Master Ninja. At this point, we also took some time to discuss if there might be any skills that could be useful for future chapters, and following a quick look at the classes Hinata currently had access to, we homed in on the Mechanist class we had yet to touch. This class grants the Golem Bane and Replicate skills, the former of which would be useful against the Stoneborn that would occasionally appear from this point, while the latter would be essential to ensuring a quick end to the Xander map. Before any of that, however, we had an infiltration to pull off in Chapter 22, Hidden Capital. After a handful of gimmicky and especially spammy maps, it was high time for another proper one, and Shura did not disappoint. Chapter 22 is, in my opinion, what a challenging Fire Emblem map should look like at its core, though perhaps I only felt that way since I had to complete the map with just a single unit. Anyway, for as much as I appreciated the strategy factor actually coming into play again on this map, I certainly didn't appreciate the intensely unlucky RNG we started things off with.
This is, I think, the worst start to a map ever.
Literally got hit by a 20 and a 25, yeah, that's fantastic.
In the end, sensibly switching between the Sting and Dual Shuriken allowed us to confidently work our way up to the top, and while sometimes things got much too close for comfort, a combination of Vantage lethality triggers meant that we were up against the man himself before we knew it. A man who looked awfully smug in spite of his 0% hit rate. Though he was able to run, he most definitely couldn't hide, and he soon went down to our Dual Shuriken without much of a fight. Shura was now on our side, and while typically I would have loved to use him, he had to regrettably be set aside for this run. At least we had the decency to not even consider killing him off for his boots. We soon upgraded the arena, and in patrolling the castle, we then received an item we shouldn't have been able to, as this guy literally doesn't exist in this timeline. Hinata again urged us to please go outside, and his wish was quickly granted, as before we would allow ourselves to finish off day 4, we had one more critical map to clear. Chapter 23, Camilla. Oh, you know the game's getting good when a light starts playing in the background. I prefaced this map by stating that I would have loved to have air superiority for it. That single skill, from my experience, completely trivializes large chunks of this map as well as the next one, and without it, the combination of Wyvern Lords and Malik Knights covering the entire weapon triangle was bound to prove tough to combat. Realistically though, not having air superiority wasn't the biggest problem on this map. No, something much more threatening was Camilla's destructive programming. On this map, Camilla will activate one of the dragon veins near her every single turn, triggering explosions throughout one of the 3 vertical passages on the map, and with it clearing any obstacles in said passages. She therefore enabled the cavalry units lying in wait to reach us a lot quicker, which in turn allowed us to be pincered and swarmed much more effectively. Oh, also, the enemies of course took 0 damage from these very same explosions, because balance, much like justice, is an illusion. We found that the easiest way to partially circumvent Camilla's fiery barrage was to haul up in one of the horizontal alleyways and batten down the hatches, which went pretty well for a solid while. That was until the patented FatesFanboy RNG kicked in once more. Turn 4 saw us getting hit by a 14% and a 24% magic hit in the same enemy phase, after which the incoming Bone Knights ultimately proved fatal. Our second try at this map was made a whole lot less painful by the ludicrous number of crits Hinata managed to pull off with the Barb Shuriken, all but clearing out the initial cluster of enemies. We effectively had free reign over our little corridor now, and from there we could simply switch over to the Dual Shuriken. This allowed us to trick the Great Knights into switching over to using their considerably less powerful silver swords, and also gave us a keen advantage against the Bone Knights approaching that same turn. As we continued to switch between the dual and barb shuriken depending on which classes were most prominent, we slowly but surely trimmed down the enemy's numbers, after which we could tentatively begin moving towards Camilla. This did mean sustaining some damage, but seeing as all enemies within range had terrible odds against shurikens, and Hinata had reached level 15 earlier, granting him once again a point of skill and shuriken fare, we were confident enough to step out into Nor's medieval minefield. Aside from the continuous explosions, one more thing we had to keep in mind was the reinforcements starting to seep in at the end of turn 5. Paladins and Dark Knights from the right, Wyvern Lords and Melee Knights from the top and bottom, and finally, Sorcerers from the left. You can tell the game designers really started trying to make the players' lives miserable right around this chapter. Our tactic of popping in and out of the different alleyways proved highly effective. These one-space-wide corridors practically acted as choke points on both ends, allowing Hinata to only be attacked from 2 sides at a time. They also served as convenient safe spots while we baited out some of the otherwise static units, such as Arthur. Oh, poor Arthur. In spite of that heroic 24% he landed, he had the camera flipped on him and got teabagged on top of it. A truly glorious end, which we solemnly salute him for. We took a few turns to sit out the flying reinforcements before moving on to Effie, who met with an equally tragic end as her fellow retainer. Training your entire life only to get one-shot by a guy with a dart? Ugh, that must sting. You know, because we used the sting shuriken. I'll stop. Once again, we took our sweet time waiting out the sorcerer reinforcements approaching from the left. We wanted absolutely no surprises when drawing close to Camilla.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
I'd equipped Hinata with the dual shuriken to counteract both Baruka's Brave Axe and Selina's Crescent Bow, though in the end, he just ended up getting pummeled by magic units. Luckily, I'd counted correctly earlier, and with Vantage, this otherwise fatal magic attack would be blocked by Hinata's guard stance. And as an added bonus, Selina did in fact attack us at range, leading to this beautiful combat forecast. All that stood between us and victory now was one final cluster of Wyvern Lords and Malik Knights, including Baruka and Camilla. I was a little wary of Camilla's Brave Axe, but that was about it. Baruka was a complete joke, and the Malik Knights were baited into using their tomes easily enough. After applying the talisman we'd looted from Baruka and bumping up Hinata's lacking resistance just a little more...
Alright, try me, Camilla.
The girl's dead.
No, she doesn't die in Birthright. She just gets depressed.
We soon brought about Camilla's downfall, thus spelling the end of the eldest princess of Nor as well as an arduous day 4. With 4 long days of Fates gameplay behind us, we only had 5 chapters left to beat, but to cover all of them in one session would be a bit of a tall order, we figured. In fact, day 5 only ended up spanning 2 chapters in total. Before even picking things up where we'd left off the day before, we had already determined that day 5 was going to be entirely dedicated to preparing for the finale and forcing our way past 2 of Birthright's most challenging chapters by any means necessary. As you've seen by now, Birthright's lunatic difficulty and the challenge it provides heavily hinge on exorbitant amounts of reinforcements, and Chapter 24 as well as Chapter 25 were still going to kick things up a notch on that front. A fantastic prospect, I know, but trust me when I say that day 5 wasn't nearly as painful as some of the previous days, in part due to a few specific preparations we made. At the tail end of day 4, during the Camilla chapter, a suggestion had been made to get the Astra skill in order to allow for easier activation of the guard stance. Seeing as the next few chapters would be some of the most reinforcement heavy ones yet, we figured we may well benefit from having a guard stance ready more frequently. And with Hinata's inherent access to it and his amazing skill stat, it was safe to say that a plan was officially brewing. One reclass later, we were on to one of the scout maps available to us, where we ran into a slightly concerning roadblock, though we ultimately received an excellent level up as well as Astra. Just like that, we were on to our next task. More grinding. In the interval between our preparations in the castle and us getting Astra on Hinata, we decided to follow up on a plan we'd come up with earlier. Reclassing Hinata into a Mechanist, one of my favourite classes in Fates. See, now that we were approaching Xander's chapter rather quickly, we figured it would be ideal to have replicates before reaching that point. And as we'd been grinding for a little while already, we thought it convenient to do as much as we could now so that we could tackle the story maps in one fell swoop later. After an upgrade to the mess hall, we thus dove into what would be the longest grinding session of the run. An hour and 3 minutes of barraging enemies with shurikens and arrows, minor heart attacks.
I got moved, it seems. I was literally just here, and then suddenly I was here.
surprising item drops,
oh, a Draco Shield? Holy shit, that's really good RNG actually.
and tiny bouts of screwing about.
I can make another Hinata. Double the fun.
However, at the end of it all, we were 2 great levels as well as 1 essential and 1 less essential but still useful skill richer. I'll let you decide for yourself which one is which. For the sake of pacing, I decided to compile all the castle events that happened during our grinding session into one segment here. All in all, we upgraded, in the following order, the Fishing Hole, Lilith's Temple, the Mess Hall, the Launcher twice, the Ballista twice, the Hot Spring twice, the Dawn Dragon twice, the Wrecker's Hall, and we built and upgraded the accessory shop to its highest level. With all these improvements, our castle was finally starting to feel like a home. Also, Izana joined after our upgrading the Hot Spring to level 3, and I thought Yukimura would eventually show up as well, but it turns out he joins only if you have one of your automatons upgraded to level 3, not one of your defensive structures, as I wrongly believed.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Anyway, with Astra, Gollum-Bane and Replicate now under our belt, we reclassed Hinata back into a Master Ninja. A quick trip to the smithy saw us reforge the Dual and Barb Shuriken into the Dual Disaster and Hinata's Needle respectively. You know, just for that little bit of extra flair. We'd prepared at length for what was to come, and now, in Chapter 24, Tears of a Dragon, it was high time we avenged Gunther. This would be our last confrontation with Hans. So, we accidentally ended up on the training grounds of Nor's army. Awkward, that one, but hey, happens to the best of us. In this chapter, our task was to carve a way to Hans through a whopping 21 turns of reinforcements. Heroes, sorcerers, wyvern lords, great knights, berserkers, and malik knights, spawning in set intervals but in different combinations each time. While not too threatening in isolation, the main trouble about these reinforcements lay in the fact that they would quickly group up with the already present enemies, in turn forming clusters that covered the entire weapon triangle. That would be a bridge to cross later, however. First and foremost, we needed to get rid of the enemies waiting near us at the bottom, and getting past them was more of a luck issue than a skill issue. The Sorcerer Great Knight combination covering both of our potential weaknesses simply kept being tough to deal with, but a combination of crits, guard stances and Astra got us through it well enough. In the words of the Black Fang though, carelessness invites death. Which is exactly what happened when I forgot to switch to the dual shuriken here, leaving us vulnerable to the incoming reinforcements. All of which, of course, carried axes, meaning things came to a wrap rather more quickly than we would have liked. As many times before though, our second attempt went off without a hitch, especially as we alternated between our upgraded Sting and dual shurikens to deal with either the red or green units approaching in waves. This tactic eventually brought Hinata to level up, gaining him a point in skill and resistance. Admittedly, the reinforcements did get overwhelming at times, and there were plenty of moments in which the enemy formations reduced our strategy to just heal and hope for the best. But as soon as we'd pushed past the main enemy force and worked our way up to the top half of the map, we only still had to wait out the last scraps of enemy reinforcements before rounding up the stragglers, getting our Wormslayer, and then finally moving up to confront Hans. In his typical fashion, Hinata popped the fuck off and killed Hans in the flashiest way possible, and so blindingly quickly that the guy had to summarize for himself what had just happened.
You killed me! How can this be? That's peak Fates writing.
Hans and Lilith might have been dead, but our run was more alive than ever. So much so that we immediately powered on to our final standoff with Yago in Chapter 25, Traitor Revealed. Going into this chapter, our objectives were twofold. On the one hand, we needed to get away from the bottom of the map as soon as possible, as a battalion made up of Bone Knights, Great Knights and Dark Knights would spawn there every single turn until turn 5. On the other hand, we needed to eliminate anything that threatened our chances of getting to the chests in the upper corners of the map, as they contained the Pursuer, the Grand Vestal, the Water Wheel and a pair of boots, the very latter of which was of course the most essential for our run. Following a quick overview of the map, we found that the fastest way to achieve both of these goals was to beeline for the rectangular room just before the staircase, towards which purpose we came up with a plan. If we stepped into the staff range of the strategist just beyond the center partition, she would entrap us, and thus effectively warp us a full 2 turns worth of movement closer to our goal before turn 1 had even ended. This plan ended up working beautifully, though it came with a catch. Around the middle of the staircase was another strategist with entrap who would warp us closer to Yago, which in itself was actually a fortunate turn of events. Disregarding the sorcerers, nothing really threatened Hinata if we stuck with the dual shuriken, and the closer we could get to the top of the map, the better. The real problem was that there was a third strategist with entrap in the very back. This one, however, was static, and if we got entrapped by her, we would invariably end up in range of Yago, and if he then inevitably decided to attack us, we'd have a good chance of killing him and thus ending the map just like that. This would mean forfeiting the valuable weapons in the chests, but more importantly, the boots, something which we were vehemently against. In essence, we would clear the map in true LTC fashion, but at what cost? Oh, and for anyone wondering, yes, this is foreshadowing. On our first attempt, the top strategist wound up missing her entrap, meaning we were safe from reaching a preemptive and involuntary end to the map. Ironically though, this stroke of good luck led to an entirely different pressing issue to deal with, namely a genealogy-sized cavalry squad coming charging our way. As much as the odds actually did end up being in our favour, we could ultimately only postpone the inevitable. On our second attempt, I begrudgingly returned to using tonics. It had been great seeing how well Hinata performed without them, but the time of pulling our punches had clearly passed. We once more skipped our way towards the top of the map thanks to the very helpful entrap strategists, though as fate would have it, the uppermost strategist landed her entrap this time, throwing us right into combat against Yago.
I mean, that's not really good though. I might miss, it's true.
Hinata, however, definitely didn't miss.
Yeah, that's... We have actually won, but at what cost, is the question.
Another reset it was. We made a third attempt shortly after, but we were done in this time arguably by this 25% sorcerer hit, leading over time to Hinata being at too low HP to fend off the incoming waves of Great Knights. This is also where we found out that we definitely come underprepared for this chapter in terms of healing items. Upon returning to our castle, we bought enough concoctions to last us at least a few chapters, as well as a few resistance tonics and a talisman to further up Hinata's chances against the many magic units on this map. Despite the excessive preparations we'd made, including a hearty meal granting 2 strength, resistance and speed, it still took us 2 more attempts to find the perfect sequence. Well, near perfect. The decision to take out one of the 2 incoming berserkers over healing Hinata made the following few minutes much more nerve-wracking than they probably needed to be. Being left with only 13 HP after the remaining berserker struck, we now still had to deal with a legion of Dark Knights and Bone Knights approaching from... Oh. The RNG we had that turn was nothing short of divine, but we couldn't breathe easy until the end of the next enemy phase, which would still see us face 2 generals, 6 Great Knights and a Dark Knight. As I now show you the mostly uncut sequence of events, I hope to make you experience the same rollercoaster of emotions that I did.
It's not incredibly heartening to get hit by that, but it is my luck, so... No, why do you get hit by that? Okay, technically doable. Okay, we one-shot this guy, that's good. Well, we definitely one-shot him now. My heart is racing. Okay, it's doable, actually. Come on, Hinata, one more. Yes! Okay, it's definitely doable.
Hinata actually pulled through. The cavalry units we just eliminated were the last of the bottom reinforcements, which meant that the map just got considerably more manageable. We waited out and finished off all the enemy reinforcements on turn 15. With Hinata managing to reach level 20 thanks to getting hit by a 6%. A fucking 6%? Seriously? We looted the chests at our leisure before finally heading straight for Yago, and this time, killing him meant victory. With one final, equally as impressive crit as before, Hinata felled Yago, which meant that chapter 25 was officially behind us. Finally, the largest roadblock of the day had been cleared, and we were able to personally oversee Yago's erasure before calling things a day. Day 6 was definitively going to be the finale, no matter what. Day 6 had come round, and just as planned, our run would end today, one way or another. Realistically, we were all set to head into the endgame after popping an eternal seal on Hinata, allowing him to reach up to level 25 and hopefully gain a few more useful level ups in the process. But before then, we still had one majorly cheesable chapter and no less than 2 tragic deaths to go. It was time for chapter 26, Xander.
You're here. At last. Now, once and for all.
Is this also where he just murders Elise? Is that before the map? I think it is, actually.
It's after.
No, it is before the map. I knew it.
Oh no!
Oh, I thought it was after.
I shall defend my homeland.
No!
Well then, that's certainly going to be awkward at the dinner table. Chapter 26 is another of those maps that you can make as easy or as tough as you'd like, for two reasons. First off, it's a defeat the boss map, meaning you can disregard all the other units on this map if you simply defeat Xander. And to make matters even better, there's little reason to engage the other troops in the first place, as none of them have any droppable items on them. With this in mind, we were convinced that we could wrap up this chapter in less than 10 turns, and as such, that's what we set things up for. With the Corn death music ringing in our ears, we prepared our 3-step plan for this map, a plan by which our previous skill grinding would finally come full circle. Duplicate Hinata, open the doors to Xander's chamber, then extract Fuyumi and finish off Xander with our Hinata duo. A Hinata duo. Huh, fake it never. Once again, the plan was simple, the plan was Hinata. 2 Hinatas, actually. Admittedly an entertaining sight, and much more fun to watch in combat than I'd originally thought possible. Once Hinata and Hina2 had cleared a path, we simply moved Fuyumi over to the door and waited for the next player phase to roll around. From there, we opened the door and switched the Hinata pair around so Fuyumi could transfer and switch with the real Hinata. By this point, we only still needed to worry about Xander killing Hina2. Given the 2 Hinatas shared a health bar by virtue of how duplicate works, this was a very real possibility, especially as Hinata took a few more hits than I ideally would have liked.
This is the moment of truth, pretty much, if he moves, which he should because the door is open and Corn is gone. He doesn't.
Oh, I guess not.
Well, that makes life a whole lot easier.
This is where I realized that Xander didn't move though, much in contrast to both my own knowledge as well as the Fire Emblem wiki. However, knowing this, there was no need for us to hesitate. We stormed into Xander's chamber and challenged him, taking him out in Hinata's trademark spectacular way.
That's it.
That's it.
With this, we'd clear chapter 26 in as little as 5 turns, positively smashing all our expectations to bits. Leaving Xander to bleed out against one of the pillars of Castle Krakenberg, we returned to our own castle one last time, the finish line now feeling tantalizingly close. In anticipation of the monumental task ahead, we called our champion over to our treehouse for some final words of encouragement. This is also where we brainstormed one last time over what we could still do in preparation for chapter 27 and the endgame following immediately after, from which there was only one conclusion we could draw. All we could still do by this point was take on the 3rd and final invasion map. The thing with invasion maps, however, is that when you only bring 2 units and pair them up, the map basically becomes a waiting game, especially when you seat them in this chair?
Not just any chair, a throne.
Nah, that wouldn't be very original, would it now? In contrast to the previous ones, this invasion map was actually mildly challenging, even making Hinata eat dirt on one occasion. Turns out those berserkers really quite hurt, even while on the throne. You've heard me say it quite a few times by this point, but the second time around, things went much better. For some reason, the Swordmasters and heroes really wanted to be on the front row to our demise, which ironically led to us not meeting our demise. These same heroes and Swordmasters actually dealt 0 damage to our cap defense Master Ninja, causing them not to attack us. Meanwhile, the various Stoneborn on the map had 0 hit, causing them to also not attack us. And all the while, the Berserkers, our only threat on this map, didn't have any 2-range weaponry, which meant that we were free to pick them off one by one from the safety of our throne. We dealt with the boss in the exact same way, all in all netting us 2 points of HP and 1 point of speed over the 2 level ups we had received up until this point. Taking out these Berserkers 1 unit at a time was starting to get a little repetitive, however. So after some contemplation, we grabbed a Raider Katana and opened what was effectively Pandora's box. The Swordmasters and heroes could hit and damage us now, the Berserkers would be able to move in, and hell, even the Stoneborn had a hit rate again.
Oh, they do try to hit you.
1% hit
1%. Oh, if they hit you, that'd be so unlucky. That means you should pull on Faye.
I should pull on every gacha I have. I should buy a lottery ticket.
Spoiler alert, I did not get hit by 1%. The rest of the chapter went about as smoothly as could be though. We 2-rounded the Swordmasters, dodged all the Stoneborn attacks, stripped some burly dudes. You know, the regular Fate stuff. We also got jump scared by counter towards the end of the map, but it was all good. With the last Stoneborn down for the count, there was nothing standing in our way towards chapter 27 and thus the endgame anymore. While taking in the atmosphere of our homely castle once again, we realized that this was it. The final intermission before hopefully completing this solo run. For our last structure upgrade of the run, we improved the Traveller's Plaza to its maximum level, after which it was time for one last shopping spree. We bought 10 vulneraries and 10 concoctions, after which we then forged our 2 silver katanas into the Dawn El Youthnir. It's a Heroes reference, don't worry about it mainline fans. That done though, there was no avoiding it any longer. The next 2 chapters were going to spell our success or our failure. In chapter 27, King Garen awaited us in the throne room of Castle Krakenberg.
I'm so glad you made it home.
Let me start off my narration for this chapter by saying, holy shit. The cutscenes in this game are as clean as I remember. But the writing, fuck me, the writing. How did I ever defend any of this? Incidentally, Berserkers actually can't wield swords, so I'm afraid that this cutscene is an impossibility. Speaking of swords though, I skipped past the Blazing Yato cutscene due to my rapid loss of sanity from reading the dialogue. And it wasn't like Garen was much impressed anyway, given how he literally broke the 4th wall in expressing his indifference. But hey, at least this cutscene still presented some comedic value.
What is Tsubaki doing here?
That's Hinoka.
Oh, that's Hinoka.
Anyway, enough banter. Time to get serious. I've highlighted it a few times before, but for anyone who isn't aware, the endgame follows directly after beating chapter 27, which means that if we were to lose in the endgame, we'd be sent back directly to this very point in the game. For your convenience, you may assume that any preparations we made here were for both chapter 27 and the endgame. The skills we opted to bring were going to be Vantage, Lethality, Shuriken Fair, Astra, and Duelist's Blow. As for weapons, we brought the Sting Shuriken, Barb Shuriken, Dual Shuriken, and Silver Katana. Onto the chapter itself then. This map admittedly isn't that difficult at all. Yes, there's a lot of different classes spread all around the map, but that's actually what makes this chapter much less complicated than it could have been. All of these different classes are neatly organized into their own little formations, making picking them off one group at a time pretty easy. Alternatively, you could opt for a balls-to-the-wall strategy like us and just throw your best unit in there. But only if said unit can pop off as insanely hard as Hinata decided to in this chapter. Even re-watching the footage right now, I can hardly believe the absurd RNG we must have had pulling off all these crits and skills in quick succession. Overall though, I have very little to still say about this chapter. Since there were no reinforcements on this map, all we needed to be wary of were the entrapped strategists towards the top of the map, which could easily throw a spanner in the works by trapping us between several enemy formations. Once those were out of the picture, however, we only still had to suffer one minor heart attack by virtue of this Berserker, who for some reason decided to carry Shuriken Breaker that day. Surprisingly enough, most of these enemies gave a metric shitton of EXP to our level 22 Hinata, and before we knew it, he'd reached level 23, and level 24, and finally level 25, his final level for this run. And just like that, we were in range of Garen. His weapon, Bulwark, has 1 to 3 range, which meant we needed to be slightly careful about where we stepped. But once we'd obliterated the adjacent general with lethality and taken out the mate that was capable of healing Garen, nothing withheld us from besting the King of Nor in a 1-to-1 battle. To our irritation, Garen did stop initiating combat after dropping down to below 50% health, but in spite of his cowardly inaction, he had no way of escaping the fate that inevitably awaited him. With this, the King of Nor had been toppled, and as such, peace had been restored to Fateslandia. Except, Garen then transformed into a dragon, snapped Fuyumi's legendary weapon into 1,000 pieces like it was a breadstick, and then spoke some truly inspirational lines that unequivocally proved the profoundness of Fate's story writing. Then Fuyumi T-posed on Dragon Garen to assert her dominance, and... Jesus fucking Christ, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. Needless to say, I skipped right past whatever was left of the story, because honestly, I felt myself losing brain cells with every new dialogue box. After a journey filled with trial and error, surprising reclasses, and a lot of bad writing, it was finally time for the endgame, Dawn Breaks. On Lunatic difficulty, this map starts off with the enemy cap reached. Right off the bat, you're faced with 50 enemies scattered all over the map, and Garen waiting near the throne in the middle. Garen will typically turn aggressive or begin triggering the 4 dragon veins near him once turn 4 has passed. These dragon veins create mires that damage player and enemy units, and subsequently heal Garen. Knowing this, what even was our strategy going into the final map? Frankly, we had no clue ourselves. Outside of applying all the useful tonics we'd accrued over the course of our many shopping trips and rushing Garen, our way forward was hazy at best. We needed to see how Garen would react to our approach before making a decision, so we passed by the bottom left Dragon Vein and found that Garen moved right onto the Dragon Vein but didn't activate it? Slightly confused but in no way discouraged, we took full advantage of the situation and moved onto the throne, from which point we hoped to slim the enemy forces considerably before reassessing how best to tackle this final chapter. To our astonishment, Garen moved directly next to us, seemingly abandoning the Dragon Veins but not attacking us either. As I'd learn later, if a unit moves within 2 spaces of Garen before he starts activating the Dragon Veins, he and all other enemies will start moving, but he actually won't initiate combat or activate the Dragon Veins anymore. Without even knowing it, our strategy of rushing in had immensely improved our chances of beating this map. And to make matters even better, against everyone's expectations...
Oh, lethality! Imagine.
Doesn't work, yeah.
Imagine if it worked, that would have been so hype.
Yeah, if only it were that easy. Dragon Skin, one of the 2 skills Garen possesses, halves all forms of damage, including from crits and offensive skills. But more importantly, it completely nullifies skills like Poison Strike, Counter, and Lethality. Still in all, our damage output against Garen was very solid, and on top of that, none of the Myers that would otherwise heal Garen were as of yet active. Was this map possible with only Hinata after all? Following a shaky enemy phase in which we found out that Hinata had very possibly been speed screwed, leading to him not doubling the Berserkers anymore after being hit with the Draconic Hacks from Garen, we looked over the situation once again. The generic enemies on the map had entirely clogged up the area surrounding the throne. This had completely obstructed Garen from moving away from his current spot, making us all the more optimistic. With nowhere for Garen to go and our position on the throne being manageably maintainable, it was only a matter of time before he'd beat the game, right? The last thing we could do right now was get ahead of ourselves, however. We made sure to only attack Garen when we had a guard stance ready, negating his massive damage output while dealing with the other units relatively efficiently. This made it so that we received absolutely no damage from Garen, seeing as he wouldn't initiate combat himself. Something that also helped immensely in curbing the enemy forces was the fact that none of the generic foes had skills, meaning we didn't need to be scared of a gimmicky death. The final chapter of the game would be decided through pure numbers, the exact principle Fire Emblem has always been built on. As the turns slowly passed by, the odds seemed to turn against us. Garen, worryingly enough, moved down a space. Recall that at this point, I wasn't aware of Garen's actual programming, meaning the looming threat of the inactive Dragon Vein still weighed heavily on my mind. To say that it was a relief to see that Garen's movements ultimately amounted to nothing would be a huge understatement. By turn 9, we had managed to cut down the enemy's numbers from 50 to 28, of which at least half were nowhere close to the inner circle of the map. By turn 10, the only units in said inner circle were 2 Malik Knights, a Bow Knight, 3 Stoneborn, and Garen. We were in an excellent position, and even more so after Hinata's latest round of combat. Right around this point, emotions were riding high. In fact, I think that for this last stretch, I'll let my original commentary do the talking.
Like, we just need to survive this round and then we've just won. That'll just be it. So Hinata, if there was ever a time to pull through, it would be right now.
Yeah, you're good. You're good to go.
Is that it? Is that it?
I think that's it.
If no one attacks us and Garen doesn't move, holy shit. It's going to happen, there's no fucking way. That's literally it. 100% hit rate?
Yep, it's over.
Count me the fuck in. This is it.
Yay! You did it!
That's it? Holy fuck. Oh my fucking god. Sorrowing lunatic birthright with Hinata. It's possible. There's no fucking way. That is such a relief. I can't even tell you how much of a relief that is. Like, I'm physically trembling.
Oh my god.
I'm so happy.
Oh, this is so good.
And that was that. Garen was defeated, and with his demise, we proved that it was, in fact, possible to solo Fire Emblem Fates Birthright on lunatic difficulty using only Hinata. This officially marks the end of the run, but if you've come this far in the video, hang tight for just a little longer, as Hinata's paired ending will bring the events of this run full circle in a glorious way. Before that though, a few closing thoughts. As this run's battle stats now passes by in the background in a slightly sped up manner, there really isn't much left to say for me. After my previous failed attempt some years ago, I'd hardly expected a run of this caliber to even be possible with only Hinata, my absolute favourite Fire Emblem character. Nonetheless, I'm very happy that I returned to have another go at it. A successful go. As I said at the very start of this video, Fates is, and always has been, a game I hold very close to my heart, and it's been an absolute delight to be able to experience its full splendor in this way. I really cannot thank the creators of the HD Fates mod enough for that. Nor can I thank enough the people, or dare I say the friends, that tagged along for the ride. Their support and guidance throughout this run has been what has kept me motivated to bring this project to a successful close. So to all of the people whose usernames are on screen right now, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for having been there, no matter how long or how short it was. Special thanks go out to my great friend Rar, who not only helped me find a trustworthy version of the game, but who also played a big role in the theory crafting for this run. I know all of this might sound a bit melodramatic, but believe me when I say that this project has been my biggest one since I started seriously video editing, and that it therefore means a great deal to me to have rounded it off in this way. Now, having said all that, I believe it's finally time to show you how Hinata's tale came full circle. Thank you very much for having stuck around, and hopefully, until next time.
There he is. 1923 battles, holy fuck! It is said that the couple got along but didn't have much time together, what do you mean? No! No!
It's canon, it's literally
what happened?
Canon. It's
what happened?
Literally canon. It's exactly what we were talking about.
He cheated on Kagero. No, it happened.
He sure did. He sure did.
Oh god, no, it's canon.
That was the canon. Yeah, that was the canon of the relationship.
I can't believe Hinata cheating is canon. I can't believe it.
He deserves it after saving the whole nation.
I agree. He can debauch as many women as he likes.